The old garage stood at the edge of town like a forgotten memory, surrounded by rusted car frames, broken engines, twisted metal scraps, and piles of discarded machinery. Most people drove past it without a second glance. Some laughed when they saw it. Others shook their heads and wondered how anyone could spend their life digging through junk. But on one unforgettable morning, a convoy of black vehicles rolled into that dusty lot, and everything changed. Before we begin, if you believe that kindness, hard work, and second chances can change someone's life, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs inspiration today, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories. The man who owned the garage was named Ethan Walker. To the people in town, he was known as the junk mechanic. It wasn't a title of respect, it was a joke. A nickname people used whenever they wanted to remind themselves that Ethan was different from everyone else. At 43 years old, Ethan lived alone in a small house behind the garage. His clothes were always stained with grease. His hands carried the marks of years spent repairing machines that everyone else considered worthless. He never attended social gatherings. He rarely spoke about his past. Most people assumed he had failed in life. What they didn't know was that Ethan had once dreamed of becoming an engineer. When he was young, he had been fascinated by machines. While other children played sports, Ethan spent hours taking apart radios, clocks, and broken appliances. He wanted to understand how things worked. His teachers often praised his intelligence. Many believed he would someday achieve something extraordinary. But life had other plans. His father died unexpectedly when Ethan was 17. The family struggled financially. College became impossible. Instead of studying engineering, Ethan took whatever work he could find to support his mother and younger sister. Years passed. Responsibilities replaced dreams. Bills replaced ambitions. And slowly, the future he once imagined disappeared. After his mother passed away and his sister moved away to start her own family, Ethan found himself alone. The only thing he had left was his love for machines. So he bought a small abandoned garage and began repairing broken vehicles. Customers came occasionally, but business was never strong. Most people preferred newer repair shops with shiny buildings and modern equipment. Ethan worked mostly on vehicles others had given up on. Yet there was something unusual about him. He never threw anything away. Every broken part, every damaged engine, every useless-looking piece of metal found a place somewhere in his garage. To outsiders, it looked like hoarding. To Ethan, it was a treasure chest of possibilities. He spent nights experimenting with mechanical designs. He built strange devices from discarded components. He created tools nobody had seen before. Some worked brilliantly. Others failed completely, but Ethan never stopped learning. Years of working alone had transformed him into something remarkable. Without realizing it, he had become an engineer in every sense, except the title. One summer afternoon, a local reporter visited the garage while covering a story about struggling small businesses. During the interview, the reporter noticed a strange machine sitting in the corner. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. The device was built almost entirely from recycled automotive parts, yet it performed complex mechanical calculations through an ingenious system of gears, sensors, and custom-built components. The reporter was fascinated. She included a photograph of the machine in her article. Nobody expected what happened next. A retired aerospace engineer named Robert Hastings happened to see the article online. At first, he assumed it was another exaggerated local story. Then, he studied the photograph more carefully. The longer he looked, the more confused he became. The design shouldn't have worked, but somehow it did. Even more surprising, several of the solutions used in the machine resembled concepts found in advanced engineering system. Robert became curious. A week later, he drove 3 hours to visit Ethan's garage. The meeting lasted nearly 6 hours. When Robert finally left, he sat in his car staring at the garage. He couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. The quiet mechanic everyone mocked possessed an extraordinary understanding of engineering principles, not through formal education, not through expensive laboratories, but through decades of experimentation, observation, and relentless determination. Robert began sharing Ethan's work with former colleagues. Many were skeptical, some laughed. Others dismissed the idea entirely. How could a mechanic working from a junkyard possibly create anything worth studying? Still, curiosity spread. More engineers visited. Each left surprised. Then came the breakthrough. One of Ethan's experimental cooling systems attracted attention from researchers working on high-performance mechanical environments. The system had been created from salvaged parts and designed purely through trial and error. Yet, it solved a problem that had challenged several experienced engineers. Word traveled further. Soon, Ethan found himself speaking with professionals whose resumes contained achievements he could barely imagine. Yet, despite their credentials, many were impressed by his practical brilliance. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood: hope. Unfortunately, not everyone celebrated his success. Some townspeople accused him of receiving attention he didn't deserve. Others insisted the experts were exaggerating. They couldn't accept that someone they had mocked for years might possess extraordinary talent. The criticism hurt. More than once, Ethan considered withdrawing from public attention entirely. After all, he wasn't seeking fame. He simply loved building things. But Robert encouraged him to continue. He reminded Ethan that the world needed people who could solve problems from unique perspectives. And Ethan listened. Months later, an invitation arrived that changed everything. A group of engineers from a major aerospace research project wanted to examine several of Ethan's designs. The meeting would take place at his garage. Ethan nearly declined. The idea seemed ridiculous. Why would accomplished engineers travel across the country to visit a mechanic surrounded by scrap metal? Yet, the invitation was genuine. The scheduled day arrived. Ethan woke before sunrise. He cleaned the garage as best he could. He organized tools. He swept the floors. Still, no amount of cleaning could hide the fact that the place remained a junkyard. By mid-morning, anxiety filled every corner of his mind. Then he heard engines approaching. Several vehicles entered the lot. Men and women stepped out carrying equipment cases, notebooks, and tablets. Among them were engineers connected to projects associated with NASA research partnerships and aerospace innovation programs. For a moment, Ethan simply stood frozen. The people he had spent years reading about were walking through his garage. They examined his machines carefully. They asked questions. They studied diagrams sketched on old paper. They inspected prototypes assembled from scrap components. Hours passed. Nobody laughed. Nobody mocked him. Nobody treated him like a joke. Instead, they listened. They took notes. They discussed his ideas with genuine respect. At one point, an engineer spent nearly an hour analyzing a mechanism Ethan had built from discarded transmission parts. The engineer eventually looked up with amazement. The solution was unconventional, unpolished, but remarkably effective. For Ethan, that moment meant more than any award ever could. Because for the first time in his life, people saw him for what he truly was. Not a failure, not a joke, not a junk mechanic, but an inventor, a problem solver, a man whose potential had never disappeared even when circumstances buried it beneath years of hardship. News of the visit spread quickly. Local newspapers covered the story. Television stations arrived. Suddenly, the same people who once mocked Ethan were telling others they had always known he was talented. But Ethan wasn't interested in proving anyone wrong. He had spent too many years carrying that burden already. Instead, he focused on what mattered, using his knowledge to help others. He began mentoring local students interested in engineering. Teenagers who once believed success required expensive schools and perfect opportunities found inspiration in his story. Ethan showed them that curiosity mattered, persistence mattered, learning mattered. Most importantly, he taught them that failure was not the opposite of success. Failure was part of success. The garage itself transformed as well. What had once been considered an eyesore became a place of learning. Students visited regularly. Engineers occasionally returned to collaborate on projects. Researchers studied some of his designs. And through it all, Ethan remained humble. One evening, nearly a year after the NASA-affiliated engineers first visited, Ethan stood outside his garage watching the sunset. The piles of scrap metal glowed orange beneath the fading light. For a brief moment, he remembered all the years people had laughed at him, the lonely nights, the missed opportunities, the dreams he believed were gone forever. Yet somehow, every setback had led him here. Every obstacle had taught him something. Every hardship had shaped the person he became. He realized that success hadn't arrived the day the engineers walked into his garage. Success had arrived much earlier. It arrived every time he refused to quit, every time he kept learning, every time he chose hope instead of surrender. The engineers had simply helped the world notice what had been there all along. Before we reach the end of this story, I have a special request. Please comment below with the words, "Never give up." It helps spread this message of perseverance to more people around the world. Years later, visitors continued arriving at Ethan's garage. Some came to learn. Some came out of curiosity. Others came because they needed proof that dreams don't always follow traditional paths. Whenever they asked him how he achieved so much without formal training, Ethan would simply smile and point toward the mountains of scrap surrounding the garage. Because hidden inside every broken machine was a lesson. Inside every failure was knowledge. Inside every discarded piece of metal was potential waiting to be discovered. And perhaps the same was true for people. Many individuals spend their lives believing they are ordinary because others tell them so. Many give up because society labels them as failures. Many stop chasing dreams because circumstances convince them it is too late. But Ethan's life became a reminder that human potential cannot be measured by appearances, titles, degrees, or public opinion. Sometimes the greatest talent hides in the places nobody bothers to look. Sometimes the brightest minds work quietly in forgotten corners of the world. And sometimes the person everyone calls a junk mechanic turns out to be someone capable of inspiring. Engineers, changing lives, and proving that determination can overcome almost any obstacle. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or reminded you never to give up on your dreams, please like the video, share it with friends and family, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these powerful stories reach people who may need hope today. As darkness settled over the little garage, the world finally saw what Ethan had always known deep inside his heart. Nothing is truly worthless, not broken machines, not forgotten dreams, and certainly not people. All they need is someone willing to see their hidden potential. And that is why the man they once called a junk mechanic became a symbol of perseverance, proving that sometimes the greatest treasures are found in places everyone else calls junk. The end.